The emperor's eyes had stayed open for 3 whole days, just staring at nothing, while flies gathered in the corners of his eyes. Inside the villa's shiny marble hallways, the servants walked very quietly, all of them too scared to be the one who had to admit the smell meant the emperor was already dead. Outside, past the tall cliffs of Capri, a noise started far away, like ocean waves crashing on rocks, but hour by hour, it got louder. That sound became words. To the Tiber, with Tiberius. People started saying it in Rome's streets, and then it spread all over the empire. In the end, the man who scared millions for 23 years was now just what he truly was: rotting meat. The servants finally found him twisted up in his bedsheets, his face stuck in a horrible look. The blisters all over his body were leaking for the last time. Nobody cried for Tiberius. People were just happy that the nightmare was over at last. But how did a hero general, who once said no to total power, turn into someone so disgusting that Romans had to invent new words to explain his evil? To find out how evil wore royal purple, we have to go back to a wedding day. A day that started with tears. Tiberius had pressed his face against a garden wall, watching his ex-wife walk past with her new husband. And that day was the last time anyone ever saw him cry. It was the year 12 BC, and Rome's best young general had just lost the only person who ever truly loved him. Vypania didn't want to divorce him, and neither did Tiberius. But when Augustus gave an order, even love had to die. Tiberius's marriage to Vypania was what kept him human. She understood his long silences and how he liked military camps more than fancy palaces. Together they built something rare for rich Roman couples: real love. Their son, Drusus, was proof that even Tiberius, who was always so serious, could make joy. But Augustus had bigger plans, and that meant someone had to be sacrificed. Augustus wanted to build strong political families. His daughter Julia needed a new husband after Agrippa died. The solution was simple: force Tiberius to dump the woman he loved and marry the emperor's daughter. The orders were dressed up with words like duty and destiny. Tiberius didn't agree at first, but saying no to Augustus too many times could be called treason. The divorce happened fast, like ripping off a bandage. One day, Vypania was his wife. The next, she was married to some senator. Roman law was clean like that, but Roman hearts were not. The servants later said they saw Tiberius standing outside Vypania's new house at weird hours. One time he followed her through the forum, always keeping a bit of distance, but never letting her leave his sight. When she turned and saw him, people said she ran. Tiberius just stood there, frozen, watching her fade into the crowd. That wedding night with Julia would become the start of something cruel. Julia was nothing like Vypania. She was sharp where Vypania had been soft. She was mean where Vypania had been kind. Julia hadn't wanted this marriage either. But unlike Tiberius, she didn't grieve. She wanted revenge. Their wedding night felt more like a fight. She mocked the way he spoke when he tried to be close. He answered by going quiet, and his silence grew colder and scarier each day. Their bed became a place of nightly shame. Julia had lovers, and she made sure Tiberius knew all of them. She came home from these affairs wearing gifts from other men and talked about how much better they were in bed. Tiberius stayed quiet. But something inside him was changing. The servants noticed it first. He used to just be serious, but now he was unpredictable. If a slave spilled wine, maybe he'd forgive them, or maybe he'd give them 50 lashes. It all seemed to depend on whether or not he'd seen Vypania that day. His famous control started to break, showing something dark underneath. Army reports from this time show a general turning cruel. Before, he gave his enemies honorable deaths. Now he made them suffer in strange ways. One German chief gave up peacefully, thinking he'd be spared, but Tiberius made him watch his whole family get executed before killing him. This general, once known for fairness, now ruled with fear. And this was just the first piece of Tiberius that died. Each month, he got worse. He began drinking a lot, something he never used to do. The wine made nights with Julia easier, but it brought ugly thoughts. He started keeping lists, names of people who'd done him wrong, real insults, fake ones, all written down, like he was planning something. The violence at home grew too. But it wasn't loud violence. It was cold, quiet, scary stuff. Julia's servants whispered stories about strange punishments for tiny mistakes. One hairdresser who pulled too hard had her fingers broken, one by one. A servant who was slow with wine had to stand holding jugs until his arms gave out, then got whipped for spilling. And still, Tiberius kept watching Vipania's house. Her new husband went to the authorities, but who would arrest the emperor's son-in-law? The stalking continued, a sign that even power can't stop obsession. Losing love had made a wound, but losing blood would fill it with poison, and that poison came fast, riding toward his son. The messenger's words hit like a punch. "Your son is dead, Caesar. The doctors think it was poison." Drusus, Tiberius's son with Vipania, was the only bright thing to come out of his marriage with Julia. He was young, he was charming, everything his father wasn't. He was trained to take over the empire one day. But at 23, he died, screaming in pain as his body gave up. His death mask showed his final face, twisted mouth, bulging eyes. Poison was clear, but no one knew who did it. Tiberius didn't say anything.
He got angry. Vipania had been his heart, but Drusus had been the last thread keeping him sane. That thread broke, and it made a loud sound inside him. But the worst part wasn't just the murder. The doctor saw something even more horrible. This wasn't regular poison. It was too perfect, too painful. Someone had made it just right to make Drusus suffer slowly. The killer wanted him to feel it, to know what was happening. Tiberius said nothing at first.
But people said his hands were clenched so hard, his nails cut his skin and made him bleed. When he finally spoke, he was calm. "Bring me everyone who touched my son's food or drink." The search started that night. This wasn't normal Roman law, with trials and evidence. This was something old and cruel. Tiberius asked the questions himself. At first, they made sense. Where people were, why they might want to hurt Drusus. Then they got weird. He wanted to know about people's dreams, their childhood fears, if they believed in punishment after death. The suspect list got longer each day. He wrote every name himself: a wine server who brought Drusus his last drink, the doctor who couldn't save him, a senator who argued with Drusus about grain, a freed woman seen near the kitchen. The list kept growing, even if it stopped making sense. It included anyone who might have gained something from Drusus dying, anyone who ever disagreed with him, even people who were just nearby. Tiberius made categories: definitely guilty, probably guilty, maybe guilty, guilty just for being connected. The killings started with the first group, but they didn't stop there. Roman law said you needed proof, but grief wanted blood. And now Tiberius knew which one was stronger. The wine server died first, crucified, but not the normal way. Tiberius made the cross lower so his toes could barely touch the ground, which made him suffer longer. The doctor was given poison, but only a little, enough to make his death slow and painful, just like Drusus. Every execution had a personal touch, a sign of Tiberius's cold revenge. What he did next to that doctor's family would become his.
The doctor had a wife and 3 kids. Roman law said families couldn't be punished for one person's crimes, but Tiberius had his own ideas. He charged the wife for not reporting her husband's strange behavior. That was a death crime if proven. The oldest son, just 16, was blamed for staying silent. The younger 2 kids were a problem. Roman law said kids under puberty couldn't be killed. Tiberius looked into old records until he found some strange laws about bad blood, the idea that one person's crime made their whole family guilty. He ordered the kids to be locked up until they were old enough, then killed for inherited guilt. But he couldn't wait. Each day they stayed alive felt like an insult to Drusus' death. So Tiberius made a new plan. If they couldn't be killed as kids, they just wouldn't be kids anymore. He had a ceremony done to say they were adults and strangled them that same day. This became the pattern. People soon learned Tiberius didn't just punish you, he punished everyone you loved. Your family, your friends, even people nearby. The empire watched in fear as his sadness turned into organized cruelty. Just a few months later, Tiberius made a big choice. He was leaving Rome forever. The architect's hands shook as Tiberius told him what kinds of rooms he wanted in the 12 villas. He picked Capri very carefully. It was an island fortress. You could only get there by boat. The cliffs dropped straight into deep water. No one could sneak up on him, and no one could escape easily either. The architect, a man from Syria named Kellis, had built fancy homes all over the empire. But nothing had prepared him for what Tiberius was asking. He wanted 12 villas, each one with its own purpose, hidden hallways to connect them, rooms with drains in the floors, pools with special shapes and viewing decks above them, rooms with hooks on the ceiling and restraints on the walls. "I need privacy," Tiberius said, with his ruined face half in shadow. Total privacy. Villa number 3 had pools that were nothing like normal ones in Rome. These weren't for fun swimming. The size and shape were very exact, deep enough so grown-ups couldn't stand, but shallow enough that anyone inside could still be seen from above. Heaters kept the water at exact temperatures. Seats carved into the walls were placed at just the right height. Kellis didn't ask why. He knew being curious around Tiberius could make you vanish. He built what was asked and tried not to think about why. His workers came from different parts of the empire, so no group knew the full design. Once they finished their part, they were sent away fast. Other villas had other uses. Villa 7 had small rooms, each one soundproofed with thick walls and cork padding. Villa 9 had medical rooms that seemed way too advanced for a private house. There were tables with restraints, lots of surgical tools, jars for holding fluids. The ships came only at night. You couldn't hear a sound from the cargo. The first ones brought food and servants. But these servants were different. They were young, good-looking, chosen for more than just household chores. They came from far-off places where people barely spoke Latin, where no one would ask questions if someone's child never came home. Later ships brought even stranger cargo, wrapped bundles that moved sometimes, boxes with little air holes. Guards came with them, soldiers from the German wars, men trained to follow orders without thinking. The whole project took 2 years. When Kellis finally finished, Capri was like its own country, one that only answered to Tiberius. Supplies came every week, food, wine, and everything else. What left the island were mostly letters and orders from Tiberius. And those orders got weirder and crueler every month. But building weird rooms was just the start. Tiberius created a court that was nothing like what normal emperors had. Other emperors had smart advisors and rulers around them. Tiberius gathered a very different team. There was Charicles, a doctor kicked out of Rhodes for creepy experiments. Nerva, a law expert who was really good at finding ways around protective rules. And Acilius, who used to run the empire's fanciest brothel, until he got in trouble for doing awful things. These men became Tiberius's trusted team. Each brought their own strange skills to help with the emperor's growing interests. They had dinner together every night. They talked about deep ideas and disturbing stuff like they were the same. People who visited said it felt like a place of smart evil, where terrible acts were discussed the same way they talked about shipping grain. Other strange people came too. Low-ranking nobles who liked weird things, traders who sold specific types of slaves, artists who painted disturbing scenes of human pain. Capri started to attract the empire's darkest people, all of it protected by the emperor. When the first screams echoed off Capri's cliffs, even the battle-hardened guards got scared. They had seen awful things in war, but not like this. A strange job ad started showing up. It asked for swim and teachers for the emperor's pools. Children were preferred. The hiring was done quietly, all over the empire's poorest areas. Families with too many kids were approached by fancy-looking men. The offer sounded great. Their kids would work for the emperor. They'd learn new skills. They'd send money back home. If parents asked too many questions, the offer was taken back. But if they said yes, they never saw their kids again. The chosen kids, most between 6 and 10, were taken in covered wagons or closed-up boats. When they got to Capri, they were confused, but excited. Many had never seen the sea before, never imagined places with shiny marble and giant tables of food. The training started out nice, just swimming lessons. The teachers were gentle. They wanted the kids to feel safe in the water, to think of it as fun. The kids learned how to hold their breath,
how to move smoothly underwater, and how to swim between adults' legs without bumping them. Fast learners got rewards, treats, soft beds, and promises of riches later. Slowly, the lessons changed. Kids were taught to nibble softly, like little fish that clean big ones in nature. First, they practiced on fruit, then on each other, always watched closely. If they bit too hard, they were punished. If they hesitated, the punishment was even worse. The name minnows came naturally. Like tiny fish, the kids moved in groups. They learned to respond to hand signals. One meant to come here, another meant to go away. They made up their own signs too, looks and light touches to warn each other about mood changes, danger, or when it was safe to relax. Parents who asked about their kids only got silence. Letters stopped after a month. Official replies were vague. The kids are fine. Training continues. More contact will disrupt their growth. Parents who kept pushing had other problems. Their taxes were suddenly raised. Business licenses were canceled. The message was silent, but clear. A few parents tried going to Capri themselves. None made it past the ports. The ones who shouted too loudly disappeared. Their names quietly added to the emperor's enemy list. The rest of the families learned to stay quiet. They spoke of their kids in the past tense, as if they were already dead. On Capri, the kids kept changing. Everything was scheduled. Everything was controlled. They got new names, usually sea animals, names that erased who they were before. They lived in dorms next to the pools. Their lives became all about training and performing. One boy tried to escape. He dove deep under the water, hoping to swim away. But he didn't know. These pools weren't made to help someone escape. They were designed to stop it.
He could hold his breath long enough to swim through the underwater tunnels, but he didn't know they went nowhere. What looked like exits were just clever tricks made by the builders. They found him hours later, lungs full of water, still scratching at a solid wall he thought was freedom. Tiberius had his body put on display for the other kids as a warning. The message was clear. The only way out was full obedience. Even dying needed permission. After each escape try, the mental games got worse. The kids were told their parents had sold them, that nobody outside wanted them anymore, and only Tiberius's kindness saved them from worse things. They were taught to be thankful for their new life, to compete to be the best, to tell on anyone who seemed doubtful. But the pool wasn't the only place where horror happened. Tiberius had figured out that fear itself could control an entire empire. Marcus Calvus had been poor just yesterday, but today, after whispering 5 words to a judge, he owned his neighbor's house. The 5 words were, he cursed the emperor's name. Whether that was true or not didn't really matter. Under Tiberius's rules, saying bad things about him was treason. Hearing those things and not telling was also a crime. Even thinking something bad and not checking it was called being careless. The whole empire became a trap where everyone was possibly guilty. The delator system changed Roman life very fast. Informers popped up from all walks of life. Failed shop owners looking for money, freed slaves hoping to become full citizens, senators wanting to crush their enemies. Information became more valuable than money, and everyone had something to offer. Marcus Calvus was a perfect example of these new informers. He was a failed pot seller who found out he was good at twisting regular talk into evil-sounding things. His first report was by accident. A customer complained about taxes. Marcus reported it as treason. That customer was executed, and Marcus got part of the man's property. The trick was simple. Say someone's guilty, plus get them killed, equals you make a profit. The empire even made posters showing this formula. If your report led to a conviction, you got 1/4 of the person's stuff. If the person was super rich, even that small part could make your whole family wealthy forever. The emperor got another 1/4. That helped fund even more investigations. The rest went to roads and temples, so everyone was part of the system now.
Delators started fighting each other for cases. Just saying he said something bad wasn't enough anymore. People started faking proof, making up conversations, forging letters and documents so well that even modern crooks would be impressed. Some informers even hired actors to befriend their targets, then get them to say things that could sound like rebellion. The best informers had their own styles. One said he could read treason in dreams. Another watched people's faces when the emperor's name was read out loud. A third claimed he could feel guilty thoughts just by checking someone's pulse. It all sounded crazy, but if it ended in death, it worked. Even kids were trained to spy. Parents taught them to listen during dinner. If someone said something weird, the kids had to remember it. In schools, kids were given fake examples and asked, "Is this treason?" Homes broke apart. Brothers turned on brothers for money. Wives reported their husbands just to escape marriage. Children were promised candy and safety and testified against parents who punished them. The mental damage spread like sickness. You couldn't trust anyone. Every secret could be used against you. Friendships ended. Even having a thought felt risky, like someone might be watching your brain. Some cases needed more than talk. Real items helped prove guilt, so people started planting evidence. They forged letters, held fake meetings using actors and disguises, left old swords, foreign coins, or name lists where the police could find them. One famous delator, Fulcinius, got really good at blaming the dead. He would pick someone who had just died, then find proof that they had been plotting treason all their life. The dead couldn't argue back. Their land and money were taken anyway. Families lost everything because of lies about ghosts. The cycle kept feeding itself. More tips meant more people killed. That meant more money for the takers, which made more people want to be informers. Tiberius loved it. He thought it was the perfect way to rule. The people were spying on each other and paying for the whole system themselves. When even the law became a weapon, Tiberius's judges found ways to make punishment feel like art, starting long before the killing. One court writer dipped his pen and wrote a new rule. Killing virgin girls requires a special step first to follow the law. Ancient Roman law had one rule even Tiberius couldn't skip. Virgins couldn't be killed. This went back hundreds of years, based on holy beliefs about being pure and fair. But Tiberius wanted to erase whole families, and this law got in his way. The answer came when a man named Sentianus was accused. His young daughter, barely 12, was sentenced to death for her dad's crime. But the judges hesitated. They didn't want to kill a virgin child. So Tiberius's legal team searched army rules. Soldiers of Rome lost all protections, even for their kids. That opened a dark door. The killer was told what to do. Before strangling her, they had to make sure she wasn't a virgin anymore. What happened next set a terrible example. The law was followed, but through horror. The rules were obeyed by doing something that made justice a joke. More laws were made. Rule books got thicker. Tiberius's lawyers worked non-stop to close any loophole that might let someone live. Age limits were changed. If someone could talk and walk, they could be guilty. The rule about mental illness went away. Madness was now proof that the gods were punishing secret crimes. One of the most evil tricks was how guilt by association expanded. Rome used to say people were only guilty for their own actions, but under Tiberius, guilt was like a disease. If your master did something bad, his slaves could be killed too. If you were at a dinner and someone said something risky and you didn't stop them, you were guilty too. If you were a doctor and helped a sick traitor, you could be executed. A new idea came up called constructive treason. That meant doing something innocent, but that might someday cause rebellion. If an astrologer said the emperor would die years from now, he could be killed for giving hope to future enemies. If a history writer told stories about old emperors getting killed, he was guilty for teaching new ones how to do it. Judges started competing. Who could come up with the most twisted rule? One judge, Vibius Serenus, invented pre-crime. He killed people who hadn't done anything just because their personality seemed suspicious. Another judge, Cautomalinus, came up with inherited intent. That meant kids didn't just get their parents' crimes, they got their parents' plans. Torture, which used to be only for getting confessions, now became normal even for witnesses. The reasoning was sick, but made sense in their twisted way. Only pain could force people to betray loved ones. But if someone confessed too fast, they were lying. If they stayed quiet, they were hiding something. No matter what, more pain followed. Court trials became stage shows. Accusers hired public speakers to make everything sound extra emotional. The evidence was shown in rising horror, each part more awful than the last, until the only possible ending was death.
Defense lawyers, if allowed, risked death if they fought too hard for their clients. One judge came up with an idea that would ruin families for generations. Judge Macro created something called sequential justice. He killed family members in the order of how close they were to the accused. Far relatives died first. Their deaths were used to scare closer relatives into talking. Parents had to watch their kids die to save their spouse. But in the end, they were killed too, for the original crime and for letting their family die. The court records of these cases are still stored in imperial libraries. They read like a rule book for cruelty, dressed up in fancy legal talk. Every new trick was written down carefully so it could be used again. What started as rare situations became everyday law. These rules lived on long after Tiberius died. Running such a cruel system needed a huge office system. Clerks were hired just to track family trees. No one was allowed to escape, not even distant cousins. Archives held massive lists. Who ate dinner with who married who did business together. The spying system was so advanced it beat even modern-day surveillance states. But the worst pain wasn't physical. Tiberius had learned how to kill hope. He made mercy his cruelest trick. A prisoner would break down in happy tears when he was told he was free. He didn't know. His real nightmare was just beginning. Lucius Orontius spent 6 months in the dark Mamertine prison. He was waiting to die for a crime he didn't commit. The rats became his friends. At least they didn't talk like humans. Then, one day, the guards came in and said he was free. The emperor had dropped the charges. Lucius cried. He thought it was over. When he stepped outside, the sunlight burned his eyes. After 6 months of dark, everything felt too loud, too bright. He went home. His wife fainted when she saw him. He looked like a ghost, skinny and pale, but he was alive. His children hugged his legs. He thought he'd never see them again. For 3 perfect days, life went back to normal. On the 4th day, soldiers knocked again. They said new evidence was found. The mercy was taken back. Lucius's wife screamed as he was dragged back. But she wasn't the first to learn the emperor's favorite game. 3 days of freedom hurt worse than 3 years in a cell. Tiberius's fake kindness hurt more than torture. It was so exact, it felt like a science. Guards studied each prisoner to find out what made them happy. A family visit, a favorite food, a walk in the sun. Then they gave it back to them just long enough to believe, then ripped it away. The pain became 10 times worse. Some prisoners went through this over and over. One senator, Gaius Silius, was freed and arrested again 7 times in 2 years. Every time, it was timed perfectly. Just long enough to feel hope, never long enough to recover. His final execution felt like a relief. Even he welcomed it.
The true evil in this game was its randomness. Sometimes the mercy lasted a few hours, other times months. No one knew what was real anymore. They couldn't enjoy the happy moments, but they also couldn't give up. They were trapped between fear and hope. Some prisoners begged to die before getting another fake release. Marcus Lepidus tried to hang himself. He didn't want to go through the cycle again. The guards saved him, healed him, then gave him his freedom again. He spent those days like a statue, no talking, no moving, just waiting. When they came back to take him, he actually smiled. These games broke families too. Wives who cried for their husbands now had to uncry, then cry again. Kids didn't know if their dad was alive or not. They were scared to love him again. The emotional damage lasted for generations. Even worse were the conditional mercies. You'll stay free if your brother confesses. You'll live if your son stays loyal. Prisoners were let out but tied to rules they couldn't control. They became part of their own torture machine. This worked so well, other emperors copied it. Tiberius kept records with scary pride. He wrote letters to governors telling them the best times to strike emotionally. He even made charts about how long people took to mentally break. Fake mercy became another Roman invention, exported across the empire. Some prisoners eventually stopped feeling anything. They went mad. They didn't care if they were free or jailed. These broken people were useless to Tiberius. He wanted pain, and pain needed awareness. So he made doctors keep the prisoners just sane enough to feel it. The system of fake kindness became its own business. Families paid a lot to find out if another mercy was coming. Guards sold secrets. A black market formed. Philosophers taught how to stay calm while waiting for pain. Doctors gave herbs to numb the waiting. While the empire's minds broke, Tiberius's body began to show the rot inside. Mirrors became his worst enemy. His doctor jumped back in shock when a sore exploded. His face leaked pus. No cream could stop it. At first, it was small, just a rash, a few boils. His skin stopped healing. Doctors blamed food, stress, or the Capri weather. They tried normal treatments, but Tiberius wasn't normal anymore. His body was trying to show that on the outside. By age 70, there was no hiding it. His face and scalp were full of open sores. They leaked non-stop. The smell followed him everywhere, like dead meat mixed with perfume. Servants had to breathe through their mouths around him. Everyone saw the irony. The man who called himself a god was now rotting while alive. Priests forced to call him holy now fought to hold back vomit. Rome made jokes about it. His face got worse, and so did his cruelty. When the sores were bad, more people died. Doctors watched his skin the way people watch storms. They warned others, it's going to be a bad day. Mirrors were banned from Capri. One day he saw his reflection by accident. The shiny bronze showed the truth. The divine ruler looked like a disease. Servants who left mirrors out were whipped. One woman died for wearing jewelry that showed his face too clearly. Medical checkups became weird plays. Doctors looked without really looking. They used side eyes and careful touches. They said things they knew weren't true, because telling the truth meant death. Everyone knew the game was fake, but the truth was worse. Servants who saw his face vanished. Staff made up new rules. Don't look directly. Walk backward when serving. Always stare at the floor. Wear hoods that block side vision. Even accidents could kill you. One maid gasped when she saw him by mistake. She was strangled that same night. His fear of being seen wasn't just vanity. He believed people could use his image for black magic, that a painting of him could be cursed. Artists were banned from drawing him. Coins still showed his young face, decades out of date. The empire was ruled by a memory, while the real horror stayed hidden. The worse his body got, the crueler he became. He couldn't sleep from the pain, so he found comfort by watching others suffer. Nighttime killings became normal. The screams helped him forget his own. He even tested if different tortures helped his pain, like human suffering was medicine. His smell came before him like a ghost of doom. Even outside, in the open air, people knew Tiberius was coming even before he arrived. His smell warned them minutes in advance. Flowers wilted when he passed. Maybe it was real, or maybe the scared servants just imagined it. Animals ran away. Even the sea breeze, which should have made the air fresh, just made the stink stronger. Hiding the rot became desperate. People lit incense sticks before he entered, making thick clouds of smoke. The perfumes were so strong, they made people's eyes burn and throats sting. The cure became worse than the sickness. As the nobles coughed and gagged, the emperor's rot seemed to spread through the palace like poison. Those closest to Tiberius started getting sick too. Rashes, boils, strange diseases that made their bodies waste away. Maybe it was germs, maybe it was punishment from the gods, but being near him clearly had a price. His top advisors turned into walking zombies. But even while his body rotted, Tiberius invented one last nightmare. He turned Capri's cliffs into Rome's most feared place of death. The soldier assigned to guard the bottom thought it would be easy work. He was wrong. The first time a body smashed onto the rocks changed everything. Centurion Marcus Flavius had been in the army 20 years. He'd survived dark German forests and hot deserts. He thought Capri would be a peaceful ending to his career, just a bit of guard work. No one told him about the cliff, or what he'd be doing there. The spot was perfect, a 300-foot fall onto sharp rocks, deep sea just beyond to wash the bodies away. No trial, no formal show, just gravity. Tiberius had found the most efficient way to kill. Nature itself would do the work. Marcus's job was simple to explain, but horrifying to do. Wait at the bottom, carry a club with a hook. If someone survived the fall, finish them. Sometimes they did survive, broken, bleeding, but alive. They begged. He couldn't help. His orders were clear. Finish what gravity started. Some victims tried to jump before they were pushed, but the guards were trained to watch closely. The moment someone's fear turned into action, they were grabbed. Even the choice of when to die wasn't allowed. Walking to the cliff became a ceremony of fear. Victims were made to go slowly, step by step. Some were lied to, told they were going to boats for exile. They believed it until they saw the cliff. Others knew from the beginning. That made every step worse. People were often killed in groups, whole families accused of plotting. Sometimes it was just to hit the daily number. Each person had to watch the others fall before them. Children watched their parents die. Husbands saw their wives shoved over the edge. The pain built and built. The rocks below turned red. The stains never went away. Even when tides washed over them, the color stayed. Fishermen avoided that part of the sea. They said their nets came up full of nightmares. Birds that ate from there were called cursed. No one ate their meat. Marcus Flavius used to keep track, little marks on his shield. After the 100th, he stopped counting. But he couldn't stop remembering. The young woman who smiled before jumping, the old man who screamed at the gods, the little boy who shouted for his mom. The cliff didn't just kill, it sent a message. Ships approaching Capri could see what it meant. At night, the screams crossed the sea. People on the mainland heard. No one could forget. One soldier tried to count everyone. His name was Quintus. He was good with numbers. He wrote it all down. Names, dates, weather, last words. It became a habit, a way to give meaning to so much death. In 1 year, he wrote that 847 people were pushed. That number broke him. He started seeing them falling even when he was awake. His friends heard him whispering apologies to no one. One day they found him at the bottom too. He had joined his list. After that, no one stayed on cliff duty more than a month. Even that was too long for some. Soldiers who had seen war couldn't handle watching this. Just standing there, waiting for someone to die, felt worse than battle. After 23 years of horror, the Roman people began wishing for something they'd never asked for before: the emperor's death. In quiet bars and back rooms, people whispered the same hope. Is the monster dying? By 36 AD, news of his health became the empire's favorite rumor. Every cough on Capri gave people hope. Every late message made them wonder. The markets followed his condition like weather. Grain prices dropped when he got sick. They went back up when he recovered. Even the economy was tied to his life. Everyone prayed, but secretly. Temples got more offerings to the gods of death, but people said the offerings were for other reasons. Curse scrolls were buried at crossroads. They had tiny writing begging for the emperor to die. Even hatred had to be hidden. Too many ears were listening. Assassins had tried before. They all failed. And each failure meant more deaths. Not just the plotters, but anyone who didn't look scared enough afterwards. Pretending to be shocked became required. People even practiced their surprised faces in mirrors. But every rumor ended the same way. He wasn't dead. He came back, and he knew who had hoped too loudly. Lists came next, then arrests, then executions. One time, a crooked messenger lied and said Tiberius was dead. People celebrated too early. The emperor let the parties go on for 3 days, then showed up. The punishment was brutal. Hundreds were killed. Everyone related to the messenger was wiped out. The emotional roller coaster wore people down. Even strong Romans broke. Hope became its own kind of torture. People learned not to believe anything good. Others just gave up and went crazy. They couldn't pretend to be sad every time he lived. Some packed up and left Rome. Many ran away. In Tiberius's final years, more and more people left. They sold everything and disappeared. They moved to the outer edges of the empire. They'd rather live with barbarians than under Tiberius. Border towns filled with these escapees. They chose risk over certain death. The ones who stayed made survival into an art. Every word became a puzzle. You had to speak without really saying anything. Public places emptied. Talking became dangerous. Rome turned into a quiet city. Shadows everywhere. The informers changed too. They followed the escapees. They tracked moving gold and shifting lands. Running away became a crime all in itself. The empire's borders turned into traps. And then, March 37 AD. This time, the silence from Capri was different.
This time, the silence from Capri was real. The first sign was the break in routine. The supply ships came back, but they didn't carry any new orders. Messages sent to the island got no reply. The perfect, ticking machine of the empire's rules suddenly stopped. Maybe, just maybe, this silence meant what everyone had been hoping for. But still, no one celebrated. Last time, hope had gotten people killed. So they waited, quiet, frozen. Business slowed down. Everyone in Rome was holding their breath. Even the informers didn't dare report people for being too happy. What if it was too soon? Then the hint came, not in words, but in action. In Rome, people started planning a funeral before any official statement. Someone important had died on Capri. Someone important enough for a royal ceremony. Hope turned into maybe. Maybe turned into probably. But no one cheered. 20 years of fear had trained people to hide their feelings. Then, on the morning of March 16th, a servant tiptoed into the emperor's room and found what millions had been praying for. But was the nightmare really over? The servant's sandals barely made a sound on the marble floor as he stepped closer. 3 days of silence had given him courage to check. The smell came first. Rot, hidden under perfume. Death's smell. Nothing could hide it. Tiberius was twisted up in silk bedsheets. His eyes stared up at the ceiling, stuck on some horror only he could see. Flies walked across his open eyes. Their buzzing was the only sound in the room. The face that had ruled through fear was now just a piece of meat. The sores on his skin were still leaking. The fancy sheets would be burned. No one would try to clean them. The servant backed away like the dead body might still talk. Outside, in the hallway, other servants were creeping in too. They saw each other. They didn't need to say anything. One ran to find the guard captain. Another went to light the signal fires. The rest just stood there, shocked. The monster was dead. But what now? News spread fast. Capri's villas filled with whispers. Servants who had lived in shadows for years stepped into sunlight. Guards put down the weapons they had used to hurt others. In the pool, where terrible things had happened, someone started draining the water, as if that could wash away the evil. On the mainland, sharp eyes saw the signal flames. "He's dead," someone said. "The Emperor is dead." That whisper grew louder. It became a murmur, then a shout, then a roar. 23 years of silence exploded. The chant started in Rome's poorest areas, where he'd done the most harm. "To the Tiber with Tiberius!" The chant grew louder. It moved through the streets, through the markets, through the Senate. People who had been scared for years suddenly felt brave. Neighbors who had reported on each other now hugged and forgave. Parties began without planning. Wine was given away like water. Musicians played songs that had been banned. Dancers filled streets that had only seen funerals. Rome laughed. Rome cried. Rome screamed. But even in joy, the damage showed. Kids who grew up under fear didn't understand why people were so happy. Grown-ups flinched at their own laughter. 20 years of fear doesn't just go away in one day. Yes, the empire was free, but it was also broken. Leaders argued about what to do with the body. By law, the emperor was supposed to get a royal funeral, even god honors. But this was Tiberius. The same senators who once called him a god now wanted his body thrown out like trash. While they argued, the body kept rotting. Crowds outside shouted louder, "To the Tiber with Tiberius!" Rome had done this to enemies before, dragged their bodies through streets and tossed them in the river, but never to an emperor, never to someone once called divine. The government froze. The people took over. Meanwhile, Capri gave up its secrets. The pools drained out small bones, silent stories of horror. Secret rooms showed terrible tools. Archives had lists, so many names, crossed out one by one. The whole island felt evil, like the stone itself had soaked up pain. Survivors came out from hiding. The children once called minnows were now young adults. They blinked in sunlight. Some barely remembered how to walk. Women, kept for reasons no one wanted to speak out loud, stumbled out too. Every new survivor made the story worse. The courts didn't know what to do. How do you punish a dead man? How do you repay people hurt by laws made by an emperor? How do you take apart a machine of fear without building another one? Every part of government had been part of the horror. Every book of law now had his poison in it. Some people said, burn the records, forget everything, leave Capri behind, pretend none of it happened. Others said, no, remember it, write it all down, never let this happen again. The argument would go on for generations. In the end, they picked the simple way. Tiberius got the smallest honors. His ashes were buried quietly. Rome looked away. The Tiber River stayed clean. The people didn't get their final wish, but maybe they understood. Water couldn't clean what had already soaked into their souls. The minnows were free, but they'd never feel truly free. Their memories would stay forever. Some families got their children back, but they were ghosts now. Informers changed jobs, but neighbors didn't forget. The empire took apart the torture system, but its roots stayed buried in the law, just waiting for the next monster. Capri was left to the wind and birds. The villas broke down, the rooms filled with dust. Fishermen said the place was cursed. Some nights they claimed you could still hear screams. True or not, the stories kept people away. Some places are too evil to fix. History would never forget Tiberius. He was the emperor who made cruelty normal. But the scariest part wasn't just him. It was how easy it had been for Rome to get used to it. People went along. Atrocity became routine. The evil didn't die with him. It just lost its biggest fan. Future emperors would read his playbook. Some would be disgusted. Others, curious. His ideas, legal torture, fear as control, organized cruelty, would echo for centuries.
Rome had learned just how far power could go when mixed with madness, and that lesson couldn't be unlearned. On March 16th, as Rome finally grew quiet, it had to face a hard truth. Tiberius was gone, but to survive him, Rome had changed. That change couldn't be undone. The empire was free, but freedom felt different now. The Tiber River kept flowing, carrying away trash, not bodies. No big moment marked the end, just quiet work, healing, rebuilding, hoping the next tyrant would be stopped before turning into another Tiberius. But somewhere, far away, a young man named Caligula was watching. He was learning what worked and what didn't. The monster was dead, but monstrosity? It had just proven it could survive. Rome would learn this lesson again and again, until one day, the empire itself became history's warning. The servant who found Tiberius's body never told anyone what he saw in those dead eyes. Some said it was fear, others, shock. Most just said, emptiness. Maybe that was the real punishment. Dying alone, finally seeing the monster he had become. No mirrors, no mercy.